her daughter meant to her, and saying that we have a lifetime of pain and suffering. We want to bring in our guest this hour, Michael Jaafar, trial attorney. Michael, defense counsel has talked about this mental disorder. Going to talk about that, saying he wants less than the 11.5 years that is the minimum in this case. I don't know if we'll see it here. What do you think?
I'm so sorry, Kelly. Can you repeat? You cut off for a little bit.
Yeah.
I apologize.
That's okay, Michael. So defense counsel has argued and talked about, at least what we're hearing he's going to talk about, is that the defendant had a mental disorder. And so he's going to talk about that in regards to wanting this downward departure, talking about less than the 11.5 years minimum. What do you think? I don't think that we'll see it, but you never know.
I think it comes down to two things. Susan Lorincz, for her to have a chance at this, she has to have on her behalf today during the sentencing that would justify any of that. During the trial, it was introduced into evidence that her friend was raped and she had this traumatic experience. At the end of the day, this case shows you the poor timing and bad luck of random life events. Had she fired this gun into a door and it was 7 inches to the left or 7 inches to the right, A.J. Owens would have survived and we wouldn't be here today, right? But she made a very fateful move, and she murdered a mother with 4 children. The 10-year-old was there with her, as my co-panelist has said. So at the end of the day, for her to have a shot at this, she's going to have somebody come in and testify, not testify, but basically, make a statement in her favor. At the end of the day, she was 65 years old, had never done anything wrong, but she was a bigoted, horrible person who was just basically out to basically antagonize this woman. She had thrown a skateboard at her kids. They did not have a pleasant relationship, and so she fired a gun into a door where a person on the other side was defensive. I know that what the judge is going to think. This woman was on the other side of a door when you shot it. Had the door not been there, she would have seen the gun, she would have ran away and thought of her kids, but you didn't even give her the benefit of that. So now I'm basically, you only were convicted to felony manslaughter anyway. So there's a max. I'm going to hit you with the max unless you can prove to me that you deserve a downward departure. Her state of mind was a big deal in this case here, Kelly, because under Florida law, she had to prove, and she wasn't able to do it, that she had a reasonable fear for her life. The jury did not buy it. Because the jury did not buy it, I don't think the judge can overcome the will of the jury and say, well, the 12 people did not believe it. You introduced evidence. You had a psychologist. You had had every chance to show that you had a reasonable fear for your life. You'd called the police before, but a jury of 12 of your peers did not buy it, so I'm not going to buy it. You're asking me to buy it. I'm going to hit you with the max, because at the end of the day, 4 kids were rendered motherless. So things happen. When random life events happen and bad luck goes against you and something happens, had A.J. Owens not died, we would not be here, right? But because she died and because she had 4 children and because a jury of 12 of her peers did not believe that she had a reasonable fear for her life, because Florida has a stand your ground law and it's very robust, and a jury of her peers still did not buy that she should have been in fear for her life. So I just don't think they're going to buy it. The judge is going to buy it.
We'll have to see what defense counsel presents in mitigation. That's coming up next. We're going to get in a quick break, but don't go anywhere. You're watching Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
Next week.
Still with us, trial attorneys Michael Jaafar. Michael, let me start with you. You couldn't ask for a better statement from a friend to present something to the judge, talking about how wonderful of a person she was, a Christian woman, that the defendant changed her life.
Yeah, this is the only way that she would ever get any kind of a downward departure. And I'm not saying it'll work, but that's the only way. That's what her defense attorneys knew that was needed, right? She's facing, I think, a minimum of 15 years. You have to add 5 for the gun charge. She's an older woman. It doesn't shock me that she got into her 60s and never committed a crime, yet she didn't have any friends. I mean, that would be kind of crazy. So she clearly has friends. I would hope at this point she would have accumulated at least one person who testified in her favor at a sentencing, right? But she wasn't even shocked when the verdict was read. I think she knows she's going to get hammered. Random life events and very bad timing and very bad luck sometimes just has this type of a situation. Woman had 4 kids. So I think that the testimony right now from her friend is helpful, but I think she's she's going to go away for a very long time based on what has happened.
Michael, no criminal history here. When we look at rehabilitation, I mean, she is in her 60s. Could talk about rehabilitation. Any more thoughts?
She's going to get hammered. The testimony of the grandmother did it for the judge, because you have to assume that the judge obviously is a human being who got to where they are either by being raised by parents who were alive or was not raised by parents for some other reason. Either way, the judge would come into this case with their own bias, and they are judging this woman negatively, as I am, because of what the grandmother said. In terms of rehabilitation, I always lean in favor of the punitive aspect of it when people die, so I don't think the judge is going to think about that.
Michael, Marjorie, thank you so much. We're going to have much more when we come back. Stay with us. You're watching Court TV Live, your front row seat to justice. Potentially for the Menendez brothers. I would like to welcome now my guest for this hour. We have national trial attorney Michael Jaafar. Michael, though, let me ask you this, because it was a brutal murder inside their own home with shotguns. I can't emphasize enough the shock of the nation at the time this happened, and that then it was discovered that these two, the two sons, did it. How much does all of that make a difference in really reconsidering a life sentence without parole, which is what they received at the time?
It's everything, Judge Ashley. It's every single thing. The nature of the crime, the heinousness of the crime, the cover-up of the crime, the attempt to cover up the crime, the phone calls from the jail, everything they did, the attempt to, just the sheer vanity of it. The spending spree after the crime and before they were found and they were suspected. So everything matters. And honestly, Judge Ashley, as with all things in life, especially with these high-profile cases, it comes down to politics. Gascon losing his re-election, the new DA coming in, the mandate of the people, like you said, this is everything. I'm really riveted to see what happened. The worst thing that happened to the Menendez brothers is Gascon losing his election. That's the worst thing, because that's going to overcome everything. And you heard him saying in a very, very type of territorial way, I don't look at that Netflix documentary. That's a polite version of saying, you know, get out of my face with this whole Netflix documentary. Who the hell do you think I am? So I think this new DA is going to come in and try to hammer them, because we know that the latest electoral defeat for Gascon is going to overlay every single decision that this person makes.
All right, so let's talk about what we just heard. We're going to keep the camera there just to make sure the statements are done, but let's bring back in Michael Jaafar as well as Josh Schiffer. Michael, let me start with you, because the nuts and bolts, the judge said, I'm invoking jurisdiction so I can hear this, and we're going to set January 31st for a hearing. What do you think?
I'm riveted. I can't wait to see what happens. The judge has a ton of stuff to digest, a ton of information, and I can't wait to see what he does.
Yeah, me too. I am surprised, again, because of the 8 minutes. Even though he testified in his own defense and described why it was self-defense, I thought for sure this jury was going to say guilty based on the evidence presented. Michael, you first.
Judge, actually, I always use the analogy of if the jury was a jury of robots versus a jury of human beings. A jury of robots would have convicted this man. In the first year of law school, in the first month of our criminal law class, we were taught the duty of retreat and how it works and when you become the aggressor versus the victim. And when somebody approaches you with a deadly weapon, they are the aggressor. You can defend yourself. The minute they run away and they leave, let's just say he was running away from him for 8 minutes and Camp chased him for 8 minutes and shot him, right? In law school, we were taught that means you were guilty of murder, right? But this is why when you have a jury of human beings versus robots, they make a human being decision. I'm sure that if I was a fly on the wall of that jury room, I would have heard them say he had his 2 kids in the room. The guy broke into his house at night. It's everybody's most visceral fear for somebody to break into their house to hurt him. This is my visceral fear, it's everybody's visceral fear. I think the jury was inflamed and they went to their most visceral fear and they made a decision based on visceral fear. I'm sure they thought that was justice, but the law itself says that Brian Camp should not have fired that second shot. I'm riveted by this. But now in every law school, when the criminal defense professor tells you that this is a crime, an intrepid kid will remind the professor, hey, but Camp was acquitted of this, and so there you go.
And you know, you're right, it's a law
exam question. This is a live shot. You saw when they said not guilty, he started breathing. Michael, just really quickly, we're going to stay with this case, but just really quickly, does he literally walk out of the courtroom today a free man?
Absolutely. I think he walks out a free man. Absolutely. No question he walks out a free man. And I'm still baffled. I'm still disoriented by this. This verdict flies in the face with everything we were taught in law school. And I'm sure the sense of justice of those jurors just came out of them because of the fact that he broke into his house. I do think he walks out a free man today.
Wow. I mean, even with processing, he's going right on out. Stay with us.